Good morning. I'd like to thank you all for coming out this morning. What we're here to speak about is the issue that we have with the speed limiter law that's come into effect as of January 1st. What every truck driver in Ontario and across North America is concerned about is the safety risks that this law is bringing to every motorist that travels the highways. We have a number of speakers here that are well versed and have good information about some of these concerns, and a lot of these questions have been put to our Transportation Minister as well as the Premier's office, and thus far we've received no response whatsoever. Beginning with this, I'd like to introduce to you our NDP representative, Gilles Bisson.
Hello, how's it going back there?
Very good, you?
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for being here. Good to see that there is a large media presence, because I believe this is an issue that we need to take seriously. And let me just start by saying the following. The government, as we know, introduced a law that was passed and enacted this January that makes it mandatory that speed limiters be installed on all trucks, and as of July or June of this year, enforcement on that particular policy is going to be in place. And I want to speak to what this means to a couple of issues. One, the issue of safety on our roads, and also the issue of competitiveness with other people that we're competing against in this jurisdiction. And let me start with that. We all know that Ontario, as the rest of North America and the world, are going through some very tough economic times. And in these tough economic times, we need to make sure that we don't put our industries at a disadvantage when it comes for them to compete against other jurisdictions. And I think one of the large problems with this legislation is that it really puts Ontario truckers in a bit of an awkward spot, because you're going to have people coming in from the United States that have speed limiters that are set at a much higher rate. You're going to have other truckers coming into Ontario that they're going to have to compete with when they're crossing the border. And having a differential like that, I think at the end of the day, really puts our truckers at a disadvantage from the point of view of competing with other jurisdictions. In the United States, we know that speed limiters that are used there in various jurisdictions are set at a higher speed. And our truckers going into the United States will be stuck in a situation where they'll be driving under United States posted speed limits, making it a competitive disadvantage for them to be able to compete with those people. The other, I think, really large issue is that of safety. One of the things that was pointed out when we did the committee hearings, and you'll hear about this a little bit later, is that the speed limiters themselves on Ontario highways are not going to lead to safer roads. What leads to safer roads is the enforcement of current laws. We currently have in the province of Ontario speed limits on our highways. Most individuals who drive on highways drive within the posted speed limits. And if we're diverting our monies towards speed limiters, that means to say we don't have money to do enforcement when it comes to existing rules that we have on the road. And it seems to a lot of people that have presented to our committee that the government should be interested in putting more resources and making sure that we enforce the rules that we currently have on highways across the province of Ontario. But from the safety perspective, the limiters themselves can become very problematic, because if you're driving down the road and you're driving at 105 kilometers an hour, and all of a sudden you're facing a jackknife situation, the corrective action is to speed up a little bit to get yourself ahead of get the trailer moving so you don't end up in that jackknife. Or you will be in a situation, you'll be driving down a freeway or a highway with people that are impatient behind you because other people are speeding, and it'll cause an unsafe situation on our highways. We tried to get the provincial government in order to come to reason on some of these issues. The government has decided to go ahead, and we now find ourselves by this summer enforcement of this legislation, which is going to be problematic from 2 points of view. One, we're not going to have the resources on our highways in order to enforce current highway rules, so why are we doing this? And number two, our trucking industry is going to be put at a competitive disadvantage when it comes to other jurisdictions outside of Ontario. And number three, we're not necessarily going to achieve the point that the government says is the important point, which is making our highways safer. So we're asking people, in order to put some pressure on the government to try to come to reason on this legislation. We believe it's an issue of not only public safety, but also an economic issue, and we need to get the government on side. And with that, I'll take a few questions and pass over the mic to others. If there are no questions, I have to run to another event in Oshawa. As you know, I'm running for some contest that's happening on Saturday.
One question. Yeah, Gilles, is it not true that most major fleets have been limited, they have set their limiters over a decade ago?
Yeah, listen, this is really the fallacy of this whole thing, is that the trucking industry has been running with limiters for years because they understand you need to drive slower to save gas when it comes to wear and tear on the vehicle and when it comes to the economic and environmental issues. And so most people have been pretty compliant with this in the first place. So we're spending a lot of money on resources to do what at the end? And I think that's really the question people need to ask themselves. Ontario has lots of legislation on the books to make our highways safer. It seems to me, as a transportation critic, that we should be putting our resources from the provincial government and making sure that we enforce those laws that are there. All right? Merci tout le monde. À la prochaine. Merci. Thank you.